Welcome, everyone. My name is Caroline Desmond, and I want to welcome you all to Emporia's webinar. Emporia is the parent company of Consign Pro, Resale World, and Simple Consign. We are thrilled to welcome our guest speaker today, Michelle Sherrier. Michelle owns MC Design Collaboration, a retail consultant that specializes in visual merchandising. She's also the host of the Retail Forward podcast and brings over 40 years of experience to the retail industry. Before passing things over to Michelle, I want to note that we will be sharing the recording following the webinar today, and you can submit all questions to the live chat box. Passing things over to you, Michelle.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Caroline and everyone. We just went through a little glitch, so if I sound a little nervous, that is the reason why. And thank you to Sabrina, who is running the slideshow for me. Welcome, everyone. I'm so grateful that you're here. I know you all are very busy, so this hour hopefully will help you and fly by. I'm going to try and wrap things up a little bit earlier, so any of the questions that you have, hopefully I can answer. Today, I'm going to be talking about my top tips from my time in anthropology and how they play into merchandising and storytelling. And there's a photo that follows here of a little bit of a merchandising statement. I have been in retail for over 40 years. And it started when I was 14. I worked at the Wet Seal, and I was lucky enough to be in retail throughout the years at the Anthropology and Fred Siegel. So I started MC Design Collaboration after I left Fred Siegel, but when we go into the next couple of slides, I'll tell you a little bit more background. And now I'm the host of the Retail Horror podcast. I started my journey in retail at Fred Siegel. I was very lucky to be part of the team. I started as a temp sales for the annual sale. If you know the Fred Siegel complex, you know used to be a once a year sale. I was hired as temps, and I grew the ranks through being a manager and a buyer, and ended up with 3 stores. Fred was my mentor, who I still love to this day, rest in peace. And my customer service still really stems from my time with Fred. I'm also the only one that holds the award for going through bankruptcy. The Northridge earthquakes took out my 3 stores, and I quietly closed my stores. After I kind of figured out where I was going to go, Anthropology recruited me, and I was at the Anthropology 3rd Street Promenade store. It's funny because when you start with Anthro as a merchandiser, you have to go through a barrage of interviews and tests. One of the things you have to do is put together a project, which I was very lucky that I did not have to do, because if you know me, you know I'm not artsy in the sense of creating things. I'm very much a merchandiser. Merchandisers are the ones who are responsible for the big overview. We work very quickly. The display coordinators are the ones who make those incredible displays that really take a lot of time, and most merchandisers don't have that. I'm total ADD. From Anthropology, I decided I was done doing retail for corporate, and I decided to open my own brand, which is MC Design Collaboration. And I've been schooling retailers on the standards that I learned at Anthropology. And then I've been doing that, I want to say, about 10, 12 years. Suddenly, with the pandemic, I didn't know what to do. Much like all of you guys, we were in a position where we had more time than probably I've ever had off. And all of us, I'm sure, were trying to find things to do, along with keep your business afloating. So I started doing live interviews on Instagram with retailers just to find out what's working for them, what's not, what they were doing to pivot, how they were trying to get sales. And it was great. I mean, it was great to hear what other retailers were doing. I think retailers found a lot of support within each other. Obviously, the world opened back up, and I went on doing my own thing again and kind of forgot about it, and decided a couple years ago it was time to pick up the mic and start doing the podcast. And now I talk to retailers from all across the country, along with people that bring tools to the table, I think, that I wish I had when I was a retailer. You all have heard from Crystal Media. She's been on twice. She had an amazing interview about AI. I think that's kind of what she talked to you guys about on your last webinar. But we have people that are salespeople. I'm trying to get a loss prevention person. But again, it's really about the retailers and really giving them tools that they can use in their business. And also, I think the biggest thing they've all felt like that I hear more and more is that I'm learning so much more from other retailers because retail is a very competitive. It's a very kind of secret world. A lot of people do not like to share secrets. I think everyone is so competitive. It's like, I don't want them to know. But the retailers that come on and share with us talk about everything from what works to what doesn't, how they started. So it's been kind of amazing. So if you have a chance, I highly suggest you take a listen. Don't worry about the name. It's solely based because I've done just about every job in retail that there is. So, so now on with the presentation. This is going to be the top tips I learned from my time in anthropology and how they play into storytelling. With merchandising, I've always said it is very much storytelling. It is all about creating a display that draws your customer in, that hopefully creates add-on sales, and also tells a story. So my top tip number one is, when in doubt, color it out. I think for a lot of you guys, if you're in resale and you are dealing with a lot of ones, a lot of different colors, I know a lot of you probably already do this, is that when you're dealing with a lot of miscellaneous singles and clothing, vintage, for instance, it is a lot easier to put them together by color. It's also a lot easier to shop, and it's a lot easier on the eye. It creates a much more cohesive statement. And I do it a lot in retailers for gift stores where I will combine we'll like this, a blue statement. We will do, you can go to the next slide. We will, like, this is a whole purple statement. And again, with the storytelling, it was purple and lavender. So I pulled in lavender plants. And the next one I think is a gift. But if you look at it, the color is what feeds you through. And you could have items within your tabletop display or within your unit or a wall unit can be completely have nothing to do with each other, but the commonality is the color. And so for this, the blue, it's candles, it's books, it's tarot. This is a little bit more cohesive because of the store that it's at. The next picture is apparel. So we did a blue and green thing. I tied in the blue hats and the green. So you can do it on tabletops. You can do it in racks for apparel. I mean, I know for a lot of my clients that do, when we get down to singles, we will color it out again because it makes it much more cohesive versus like, when you look at a rack and there's a lot of miscellaneous colors, it looks super broken. And when you're able to kind of color it all together, it makes it a little bit more cohesive, and it makes it a lot easier, to be honest, for people to be able to shop. I think that's the last slide for this one. Inspiration Day. Guys, this is like so incredibly important. This is something I still to this day go by, is that inspiration is what will hopefully feed your soul and keep you going and keep you excited. Again, retail's super lonely. You spend most of your time in your stores. You don't get out often. For gift buyers, they end up getting out and they're able to get out to the shows twice a year. For vintage, I'm sure you are there finding things and sourcing, and you don't have a lot of time to go out, but it's really, really important, both for your sanity, but also for your inspiration. So I suggest I go to magazines. They're my number one choice. I find more inspiration through international magazines as well as cookbooks or cook magazines. Their flat lays are amazing. Museums are a big one. We always used to do, I personally like installation museums. I'm not the big classical museum person, but the inspiration that I get from the installation ones, there was a big exhibit that came out in LA last year, and it was all art, and it was like street art. It was so incredible, and it was so inspiring. We ended up doing a background. I think one of the biggest pieces there was a giant word fuck, excuse my language, but it was in 14,000 different colors, and it was so big and so amazing that we decided to turn that into a window on a smaller scale. It was so good. The other thing I suggest is shopping other stores. Why shop other stores? Not so much to like secretly shop them on what else they're doing. Cause I know a lot of owners are like, she's always in my store. She's looking what I'm selling, especially for gift retailers that are selling new products. And the company doesn't have zip code protection. We're all shopping from the same gene pool. It's often very challenging to get stuff that no one else has. don't go in with that mindset. Go in with like, how are they hanging something differently? Like the other day I was blown away. I went to Old Navy and they really kind of stepped up their denim game. They're hanging all their denim on chrome S hooks. I thought that was brilliant for them because it's not the most forward store, but just to get out and see how other people merchandise, display ideas are always great. Even if you walk past windows and just get ideas on how you can tweak it where it's more geared to your own store. And the last one is Pinterest. Pinterest, I know a lot of people don't like Pinterest because it seems like a time suck, but honestly, if you can put in some keywords, you can really go down a wormhole and find some amazing displays. I know for myself, because I do gift show setups for showrooms, and a lot of them are selling kind of the same thing. They each have a very distinct feel. So I really have to come to the table with ideas that feel completely different to each of these vendors. And with Pinterest, I'm able to, I always start with Anthropologie because I mean, let's face it, their displays are phenomenal. I will go through and do keywords like Anthropologie or window. Right now, I'm doing a jewelry collaboration with my friend Chocolate and Steel, and I'm going to be teaching two different jewelry case designs. And I'm really trying to go down and see like the wormhole of like how many jewelry case ideas, and they'll pull ideas from whoever shot them from years ago, from like times that we were there. I'm seeing jewelry displays, and they are so good because they're not the jewelry fixtures. They're not your typical, like, I want something to feel interesting. I want it to feel organic, and I don't want it to feel like, I hate the word pedestrian, but pedestrian. So Pinterest is a great resource. But again, the magazines are still where I get it. Most of it, European magazines, I find the most inspiring. And how I pull inspiration out of it is whether it's a color or it is a idea of something. Like I found one in one of the magazines where they took everyday objects and they wrapped them in fabric, and that was the whole backdrop. So they took like a giant rocking horse and wrapped it in shreds of fabric all in one color, and didn't look like the rock. It looked like the rocking chair, but it had this texture and this color, and it became kind of the background for all the product that was in front of it. So the next tip, I feel like I'm not even taking a breath. Okay, this one is seriously going to be on my gravestone when I die. Tip number 3 is no plastic risers. Anthropologie is maniacal about how they display and how they use items as risers. Plastic risers, we were never allowed to have ever. And the reason being is your riser is also part of your storytelling. So when we would do tabletop displays, I would go to the grocery store and I'd buy giant canned goods, peel the label off. Those became a riser where you can put a plate on it, gives it a little bit of height. Anthro, like, that's what makes Anthro so phenomenal, is each of these displays are vignettes that are storytelling. This is a store wax that's on Melrose in Hollywood, and we used books, and we were doing crystal thing. It was all about pink, so I pulled in the pink rose quartz. The pink books worked well. The thing with the books is you may not sell books. I go to Salvation Army and I will buy books by the stack. I go through every single spine to see what color they are, because I want all my risers to be the same color. So if I'm working on a blue story, I will go through and pull all blue spine books, take the cover off. They make amazing risers. For this, they are books that have been moved around and around and around in the store, and we finally decided let's use them as a riser because they're not selling, but they're still interesting. They still tell the story. They still give that feminine feeling, as well as pulling the color pink into it. Another one is wood slices are my favorite. And again, it goes back to storytelling. This is Muse House. She's in Studio City. It's a very organic store. She sells crystals. And for me, again, plastic risers are not an option. We do use books here, but here I use a lot of wood slices. The great thing about this is that they're inexpensive, if not free. For LA, you can go to the flower market and there's a ton of people that sell them. But if you have a gardener or somebody that you know that has a chop saw that can cut through either thick with trees or like little slices, but they make phenomenal risers, and they really help tell the story for this organic. But if you're doing camp is really big right now, so if you're doing a camp thing, you can use them. For holiday, we use them a lot with the Fraser fir candles, again because it's the play off of that wood, but they just make a beautiful organic and really cost effective. I think I might have one more picture for, and my favorite is bread. Bread is one of those things where it's inexpensive. This is the Jellycat showroom, so I'm dealing with only singles, but they did a whole, Jellycat did a whole series of stuffed animals that were all French bread and pizza and burgers, but the bread makes phenomenal risers. And if you have a vintage store that you are selling a lot of tabletop, it dries beautifully. And it's one of those things like when we would use real food as props at Anthro, you learn very quickly what you can and can't use, because customers, as you know, will touch everything. And we did a cake, this big, beautiful cake. We had it dry downstairs for long enough that we thought that it was safe. Brought it up to the store. Within 15 minutes, a customer was like, "Oh, is that real?" Stuck their finger in it, and that was it. So bread, what's great is it dries beautifully, it doesn't fall apart, and it doesn't bring bugs. And it's one of those things where it's inexpensive. And again, it's all about storytelling. The next one, tip number 4 is use dress forms on tables to create height. This is one thing Anthro is brilliant about, is that we will, again, your storytelling is all about your merchandising and what is shown on that table. This is Rome, that is in Del Mar. She is a beach shop that's placed within a hotel. And for the vintage stores that have apparel, and you have tabletops, to drop a mannequin there, and whether you're folding down product or if you sell gift or home or anything with it, and to cross merchandise it again, it tells a story. And the beautiful part is that becomes, it could be your opening statement, but ideally when you set your floor, you're going low to high. So you could start your floor with a lower table, and right behind it, you could do that with the mannequin. And again, they add great height, because a lot of stores have these giant ceilings and everything feels very low. So when you're able to kind of create height with either a product or bringing the display down with doing pendant lights above it, that's another way to create this kind of height where you're bringing attention to the table. But it's a fantastic way to show apparel and get it literally at eye level. Keep alike items together is number 5. For everyone that's in vintage, I know that you have a lot of items like framed art or found objects that are all grouped together. When they are grouped together, they are so much more impactful. And it ends up being a lot of times where collectors end up, for myself, when I shop vintage or flea markets, the people that have merchandise, there's an antique mall. I'm here in Oregon now. There's an antique mall that there's somebody that does a phenomenal job. He sells all of the brown and gold, brown, green and blue, I think they're medicine bottles from like the 30s. And his whole entire case line is just these bottles. And because they're masked out like that, they're incredibly impactful. I think the next photo is of bottles from another store. This is a beautiful mess that's in Agora Hills. She is all found objects and all antiques. So instead of separating them out, I've decided to keep all of them together, again, because it makes it a more impactful statement. And if there is a collector that is going to buy all of them, the chances of them buying all of them in one shot and seeing them all together is better. When it comes to gifts, this keep alike items together also plays into this. This is Lit Concept. It used to be Mitchell Lit in Ventura. The son and daughter have taken it over. They have an incredible warehouse of products. Mitchell Lit has collected antiques for 40 years of going to Europe and containering things back. And when I say they have like units and units of containers and containers downstairs in their 200,000 square foot store of things that they've collected forever. And it was like Disneyland going down there, because the old school way of merchandising antique stores was stack it high and watch it fly. now I'm trying to put in the lifestyle element to this store, but to go downstairs and find hundreds of these clocks. I mean, I'm talking hundreds of clocks, and they've been down there forever, and they're in miscellaneous state of working, not working. Some of them are falling apart, some of that, and that's what also made it so beautiful. But when you see them all together, it's incredibly impactful. And again, it goes back to telling a story. I think the last slide is the mirrors. This is also a lit concept. And you could do this with art. You can do this with bottles and objects, mirrors for this instance. It creates a very impactful statement. And for this, it was like there wasn't much that I needed to put in there other than all these mirrors. So the rest of the display became kind of quiet because it was really all about the moment of these mirrors. The next one is rethink everyday materials. This is one thing Anthro, again, is incredibly brilliant about, is taking everyday materials that you may find at a hardware store or you may find in grocery stores, and start to look at them in a different way for how you would display. For this, it's AstroTurf. This is the Stephen Young showroom in Las Vegas. This is the rep for Jellycat. We cover tables in AstroTurf, and AstroTurf is incredibly expensive because you can buy it by the roll. I think it's like $35 for a roll, and you could take a table or line the inside of your window or do a backdrop of it, but it gives it texture, it gives it some color, and it's also nice because we were rolling out spring, and spring was all about the farm animals. So to bring in this grass and cover the table with it, and if you staple it from below, you can take the grass off later and the table is perfect and it kind of can roll into its next display. But it's just a great way to change up your store, and it's super inexpensive and it's available at the hardware store. The next one is marshmallows. So again, with the real food, I love using real food. Marshmallows are another thing that dry very well. This is a store that's in I think it's Los Olivos, but we did the whole window. It was for store opening, and camping has been really big as far as a concept in gift as well as apparel. Pendleton's making a huge rollback. Same, like I just interviewed somebody yesterday from Crow Canyon, which is all the enamel tinware. That's making a huge resurgence back. So we decided to do a camp window for the kids. So we made a tent out of, again, everyday materials, a drop cloth from Home Depot. I think it was $15. I just took a stick and folded it over and stapled it on the floor so it had that shape. And then the mannequins, little tiny mannequins with apparel, we decided to create big, oversized s'mores. So we built a little faux fire with just firewood. We took sticks from outside, and I bought a bag of, you got to get the big oversized. I think I forget the brand, but they are literally like 4 inches, 3 inches high. They're massive. So we stuck those on big branches, and they dry within 2 days. Like I would say, if you do something like this, set it up and then put it to the side and then install it a couple days later. But they don't, same thing. If this one's kind of squished, but if you don't pierce it with anything other than just the stick going through, it doesn't create ant problems. They dry beautifully. People can't squish them and ruin the display. But I mean, again, it's an everyday, inexpensive material that creates a story that for this camp window, it turned out phenomenal. Another display. So this is one of the ideas I've been having for the collab I'm doing with the jewelry. And jewelry, again, because when you're dealing with miscellaneous and single items and you want them to feel special, I love this display. This is in beautiful mesh. She had a massive cabinet, and this is just 4x4 wood that's been cut down in different sizes and scale, and it's been sanded down. You could stain it. I personally like it raw. We also lined the bottom in it's just black rock, I think, that you get from like a fish store or something like that. So we lined the bottom in the black rock, so the pine popped off it in the color, and then it was a neutral color, so whatever jewelry was on it was still going to show. Because I think the darker that your risers get, the harder it is to show jewelry on them sometimes. So I kept them light. And I love the fact that this is a very deep cabinet, but you could do this with shallow cabinets. You could even we're doing one with plywood that I'm going to have cut by 12 by 12 and stack them up together to get that height. Because for me, for jewelry, I always want different heights to show different lengths of different jewelry, like whether it's a necklace or a bracelet. I want something taller like these. And I also want something with different heights. So when you're looking at it, it's not one level. For this is the shot from above, but when you look at it from the face, you have several different layers, which enables you to see the jewelry a little bit easier. And I think the last one is, this is one of my favorite displays. We did a photo shoot for Energy Muse is one of my clients. They put out the book Crystal Muse. We shot in a Joshua Tree house, the entire book. And we took tumbleweeds, which are out everywhere in Joshua Tree and desert areas, and we put a light around it. So it kind of created this pendant light. This, I think, would be amazing as pendant lights within a store, grouping them together above a table for fall. You can also spray paint these. Just make sure you are using a LED light that doesn't create heat, because obviously that becomes a huge factor. But I love these also because we later, and I didn't have the picture of it, which I did. I wish I did. We took tiny little crystals and wove tiny crystals in there. So it had that little bit of light. And it was also that opposite play off each other, something very organic and something very shiny and new and kind of like feminine. Number 7, kind of going back into what we were just talking about, using real plants, herbs, and fresh bread as contextualizers. Contextualizers are something that is part of the display that is not something for sale. It is something that's plant, something that gives it a different texture. For real plants, if you can, so this is, if you can, go with real plants. Although I will say that faux plants, I have several retailers that sell faux plants. You can either buy them, but honestly, I sort of feel like if you have a chance to sell it, because I'm sure you have a lot of things in your stores that you have as just props. And you have a lot of customers that will ask, can I buy this? And it's like, no, this is just a prop. A lot of people are starting to sell a lot of faux flowers. There's a lot of vendors at the wholesale level that do amazing faux plants. And if you can sell it versus just buying it and having it and reusing it over and over, it's kind of a win-win. But I also understanding not wanting to make that extra investment. Real plants, real herbs. This is, again, this is Lit Concept, showing bread and fresh rosemary. I love doing tabletop displays like this. And again, if you have, like, this is her vintage scale and we've mixed it with new, that's a lot of what we're doing now at Lit Concept. We're taking the found objects and the vintage pieces that they're both collecting now as a couple, as well as what they have from Mitchell Lit and downstairs in storage from all these years of collecting. And we're mixing them with both new upholstery, new pillows, new textiles, as well as new gift. And you get this beautiful mix of new and old that has this texture that suddenly becomes very fresh. I know a lot of people are doing this now as far as designers, mixing old and new, but when you're displaying and you're going to show some of these items, pull in some fresh rosemary. If you have it in your yard, it's even better, but it's relatively inexpensive. And bread, again, my favorite thing is dries beautifully and tells the story of, like, we showed it on cutting boards. Ideally, that's kind of what you want to do, is show something as you would use it in your store. So we had little tiny shears that we sold next to the rosemary that people would use as cuttings. And then we show the bread with breadboards. So ideally, people get the idea, it kind of comes in their head, oh, this is a breadboard. Not that wouldn't be obvious, but sometimes you kind of have to lay it out to people. But it becomes where they're add-on sales. I need this and I need this. Rosemary, again, lavender, the salts, again, storytelling. These are lavender salts and rosemary salts. So we decided to combine the both of them. This is Serendipity in Studio City, and she does beautiful tabletop with a little bit of mix of vintage. But the fresh herbs both add smell. One of the things that I didn't mention earlier is one of the things Anthropologie has always done and has always been known for is we were merchandising under the idea of sight, sound, and scent. So when you walk in the store, what is the music you're hearing, or is it a fountain that you're hearing? Right now in the summer, they have a lot of the stores have fountains out front. Is it the sound? Is it the smell? Rosemary, lavender, the candles. There's always the candle. Now they're known for that Capri Blue candle. Any store you go into, automatically you know it's an anthropology store. That is very purposely done. And sound, whether it's music, like I said, the fountain, and then the display. So sight, sound, and scent are a lot of how I display, and all of these items kind of play into that as well, because the rosemary does remain very fragrant for a while. Again, it dries up. It's even pretty when it's dry. The next one is pumpkins are one of my favorite when it comes down to fall. Also, big fall limbs. Now that I'm here in Oregon, it kills me because I was buying these fall limbs at the California flower market where they were bringing them in from Oregon. And I was spending, I can't even tell you how much money I spent on real cut flowers. But now that I'm here and I'm surrounded by forests where I can go out and cut my own, if you're in an area like that, it is so fantastic as a way to display something to create height. It gives it that organic feel. For this, the pumpkins, the heirloom pumpkins are some of my favorite things to display. That again gives you that storytelling element. It tells that it's not an obvious statement about the time of year. It's one of those kind of subtle nods, but I just love the texture and the color that real things bring to a display. And fill that frame. I don't have any examples of this on pictures, but what I will tell you is that if you sell vintage or you sell new photo frames, please take the hideous sign out that's inside that is usually the vendor who sold it. I like to pull, and I think I have some here, vintage photos. I went through the antique mall and I found a ton of these. These are going to be part of my jewelry display we're going to mount the jewelry actually on photos for the case lines. But if you take a bunch of vintage photos and you color copy them and you put them into your frame, it is so much more enticing and visually beautiful than the vendor's sign that everybody sees. One of the things I kind of touched on it before was we're all shopping as gift stores who are buying new gift. All are pulling from the same gene pool. We all go to the same shows. Again, not everybody is zip code protected. So one of the ways for you to stand out from your neighbor that may have the same exact line is taking out to the photo. And I had a store in Malibu, Andriana Shamaris, that sold only found objects out of Indonesia. And she brought in these beautiful frames and she took photos out of magazines and color copied them and put them in. So the customer, because you could give these away with your frame, but ideally you're taking color copies. But she would change up the photos inside the frames along with when her interior started changing or when the seasons changed. It was such an easy, subtle way to create a display, to sell the frame where, again, you're kind of standing out from everybody else from having, the frame that has the name of the vendor that you bought it from. And number 9, binning. Along the lines of everyone shopping for the same thing, that everyone and their brother sells the Poppy lip balm. I mean, everybody, and they come in the little box that everybody knows. I personally, again, this is an anthro thing. We weren't ever allowed to show anything in the containers or the pre-boxed items that they came in. So even though sometimes they will have, like if you have something at your cash wrap, lip balm, whatever, hand cream, and it's in the box it came from, and it has a little pop-up, it explains what it is, the scent. A lot of people will keep those because it's like like a shelf talker. It kind of explains what it is where the salesperson doesn't have to get involved and explain it. I personally can't stand those boxes. So I will take them out of them and put them in interesting containers. This is a big giant vintage urn. This is at a beautiful mess. Because the candles are in boxes, I could kind of lump them in there. Because the other thing too is when you're doing displays, like especially for boxed candles, and you're stacking them one after another after another. It's very CVS. Like, I can't stand seeing just a row of stacked up merchandise. You want to give it some life. You want to give it some storytelling. So for this, we went with the thread of black. We did the black boxes in a big black urn. Adding on something for add-on sales like the matches is super important, because ideally you're going to have a customer, I need a gift. I'm going to take these matches and this candle. But by binning them like this, it kind of gave me a different way to show it. For lip balms and whatnot, I use glass jars. I get them at the flower market. I think if you have a floral supply syndicate near you, I know they're in a lot of the bigger cities. They sell beautiful clear glass jars that do not have lids. Don't use lids. That's one of the important things. For some reason, it is a big stopping point for customers. They will not lift the lid up. I don't know why, but it's a phenomenon that happens, and I don't know why. So I use everything out of these jars with low lips, so you don't have to dig in it, and you also don't have to fill it up so much. And those are how I'll display. I think there's another bin, but baskets, glass jars, these are wood dough bowls. Ideally, again, like, you are creating a storytelling moment with whatever you're showing, something in plays back to that display. The glass jars I like to use just because they're discreet and they are clean and they're simple and they merchandise well, whether you're using them on a countertop or in a bookshelf. I think I have one more photo. The glass jar. So that's the glass jar from Floral Supply Syndicate. Super clean. They come in different sizes, but they're a great way of showing something. So everything is not stacked up or lined up. It kind of breaks apart your merchandising and gives you another way to show it. I'm going to touch on this really quick when I talk about people not picking up lids. People also don't open boxes. I don't know why. So we had that magnifying paintbrush from Two's company forever, and I had it shown stacked up next to some other items. We even took the lid off. People didn't take it out. It was only until we took it out completely out of the box and actually showed it on a book so you could see that it was a magnifying glass is when it started selling. But I don't, if you have something that you are showing in a box and you're not understanding why it's not selling, take it out of the box altogether and show it as it would be used. So for this, the magnifying glass, that's just a little side tip. Number 10 is cross merchandising. This is the biggest thing that Anthropologie does with the most success, that creates the biggest storytelling. So I think the next photo I have is, this is a store in Southwest. We were hired to renovate the whole entire store. It was a husband and wife team that took it over from her father, and he had not changed the fixtures in probably 40 years. And I don't like to get rid of every display they have, so we kept some of their pieces, but really I wanted to create stories with the products they have, because they're in downtown Scottsdale, where, I didn't know this, but downtown Scottsdale now is number 2 in having bridal showers, next to Nashville. So every single week and weekend during summer, they have thousands of people going through. And with them are also grandparents, parents, everyone's on vacation. So when I went into the store, it was really important that I was cross merchandising and telling the story of this brand. And for them, we're doing puzzles, t-shirts, little tin birds that you find in the Southwest, books, and apparel. And again, there's the mannequin on the table. This is kind of a midway point of the floor where you're walking through. So if you're standing at the front of the store and you're starting with a low point, you're looking across, you'll be able to see what displays are in past. But this cross merchandising, we had more people walking up, like everyone was buying t-shirts. So what better way to add on sales is to add on some other items in there that people are taking home for gifts, for a souvenir for themselves. So it was, I'm going to take a puzzle, I'm going to take a book, and I'm going to take a t-shirt. And we did this throughout the entire store of creating these stories from kids to women's. The men's were personally my favorite, just because I feel like the t-shirts really kind of told the story. And you could show some of the apparel on a tea stand on the table hung, and some of it folded, Personally, I kind of like it folded in this sense because it just makes it a little bit cleaner and it works with the architecture of the rest of the table. The next one is, this is Burt's Pharmacy. They are a pharmacy that I was lucky enough to come in and redo the whole entire thing and really create some curated buys for them. So they originally had women's and they had kids, and we brought in baby and a crystal department, a huge tabletop area. And when I say cross merchandising, if you are selling tabletop, even if it's vintage, and you do have an opportunity to sell something new, cookbooks and pantry items are phenomenal to go back to that. And that is, again, what Lit Concept started doing with their vintage pieces. So this is a Mother's Day. We combined everything from dish towels that are folded down to the little sponge sets to jams to the baked goods and cookbooks. And again, like, people are going in and I need the butter dish and I want a cookbook, but those cookbooks are like the best add-on sales if you sell tabletop. And you could do 2 cookbooks and test it out. I think most of the book publishers, if you haven't done the gift shows, most of the book publishers are either by the unit. So you can do, I think some of them are 25 books, but within that 25 books, you could pull fashion books, you could pull cookbooks, you could pull humor books, kids books, whatever it is, and just add it into what you're selling already, just to create that add-on sale. And again, back to the storytelling. The next one is, this is the enamelware. This is Crow Canyon. This is also Beautiful Mess. She does, again, a beautiful job of mixing vintage and new. The vintage Crocs, the patisserie jars are brand new. The enamelware is new. It's all shown on vintage and found object cutting boards. And it's just a beautiful mix that helps create a story that creates add-on sales. And again, if you haven't dipped your foot into new items or a gift, I would highly suggest testing it out, because you could do it on a small level and roll it out on, if you do have an opening statement table or a space that you can start rolling it out little by little. I think that you would be surprised to see how it kind of balances out. It's also, I think, for Kim, when she started bringing in the smalls and pantry, what was happening is most of what she has is very, very high end vintage. There's not a lot of stuff that's inexpensive. And she's in Agora Hills at the Wizens, in the Wizens shopping complex. And there are a ton of people that come through there. And she was finding that people were coming in and turning around and leaving with nothing. And when she started sprinkling in gift, her sales started to increase. We were able to start storytelling more and creating more of these stories. So her dining table, that all of that is on, actually sold before some of the smaller items. But it really does help your sales and create add-on sales, and helps give your products a little bit of life and a little bit of storytelling. And I think there's one more. This one is, she's one of the accounts. Masson A is in Morgan Hill. She's one person that sells the hell out of faux flowers. She, again, cross merchandising back to the books. We showed faux dahlias. We showed the candles that are rosy ring that all have pressed flowers in them, and creating the sale, like multiple sales with the flowers, with the candle, with the book. I mean, it really, and it again, it all goes back to that storytelling and kind of creates these little moments within your store. I think and here's the camping one. This is still my favorite concept ever. This is from 4 years ago, believe it or not. But again, storytelling. This is Burt's Pharmacy. It's back in the men's department. We combined candles, tons of books, Pendleton, the Pendleton games, and there's the frames. And that frame, it looks like I did leave the the photo in it, but you can see the frame up top that has the tent in it. That's what I mean by you can fill your frames and kind of create these stories and place them anywhere. I mean, it makes adding in a frame to a display, as long as the pictures inside of it kind of plays back to that display, it really works well. And I think that is the last of it.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle. We do have a few questions.
Yes.
Abby sent over, what are your thoughts on some riser ideas for salon and spa?
Salon and spa. I am trying to think. I mean, the books, I still love the books. So I did it was a, it was a beauty store. It's the store that's Wax on Melrose. So it's a waxing salon, and it's also, she sells beauty products. I went through like 15 different vintage stores trying to find just pink and red covers. So the books are beautiful. I also like the clear blocks because it kind of is like a plastic riser where it's clear, it's kind of nondescript, but it also makes a beautiful display. And if you have any coffee table books that go back to beauty, those are some of my favorites.
Awesome, thank you. And then we have, do you have a customer who tries to storytell or coordinate their displays with their online store?
Yes, and I think, it's funny, we talked about this in another class I had. Was there's a study that's going around right now that there's such a big disconnect between you when the person walks in the store and when they shop online. Like, I think they should feel the same. I think that for those of you who know Just Gotta Have It, I just interviewed Karen Cantor, who's one of their reps. She also has a store in the Valley that she sells her own jewelry. It's very kind of pinup girl feeling, rock and roll. And she does a phenomenal job of both her as who she is as a brand and how she dresses, but what the store looks like and what her website looks like, all the way down to what her trade show booths look like. Because I think that as a customer, you want that connection when they walk in the store. If they've only seen you online and then they find, oh my gosh, there's their store, I'm going to stop and see it. And they walk in and they have that same feeling that like, so yummy, and vice versa if they've only shopped your store and they go online. Because there is something about going online when some stores, you love their apparel and then you go on their store and there's no romancing of it. It's just they've pulled the photos off of the vendor's site, so it's a model, it's in the apparel, but it doesn't feel anything like the store. And I found myself like not buying it because it doesn't give me that same feeling. And shoppers shop by feeling and by visual. And that's another reason why all these displays, when I do them with gift showrooms, is that you all are visual, and all of us buy like, oh my gosh, it's so yummy. What draws you in? So I think it should be the same with your websites.
Great. And then Leah from Oregon too, she's asking, have you been to Artifact Creative Recycle in Southeast Portland? We already do many of your tips. What other suggestions would you have for us?
I haven't been because I'm up in Medford. So I think Portland's probably, I think they said 6 hours away. And I just said to my husband, I want to go. For me, the biggest thing about being here that I get the most inspiration about is all these tree limbs, and these tree limbs that are covered by moss that are so beautiful and organic. And I mean, I've been cutting tree limbs down and we've high vaulted ceilings in my house. And I've been cutting down tree limbs that are on my walks and putting them in vases. And it just, that height it adds, that organic feeling and that visual is, I think that's one of the biggest things that you guys have here that you are able to use. And even just like rocks, using the rocks that you have available in your jewelry cases. But I'd love to see your store. And thank you for following up the tips.
Mhm. And then she also asked, what is a way to have consistent and clean signage without laminating things?
Anthro does the one thing Anthro does, which is amazing. The display coordinators are the responsible ones for this. So our signage for Anthro went and spoke directly to what the concept was. So for kitchen, we would have forks that had a piece of cardstock on it that was glued to the fork. We could stick either in something or lay it down flat that had the signage. I think signage should be consistent, but I also feel like sometimes when it's consistent, it kind of blends in and you don't see it. And I think part of what Anthro does so beautifully is create these signs that it's almost like the sign is what has your attention before the product. And I think again, everything, if you think it back to storytelling and to creating something with cohesiveness, that, it's all about getting your customers' attention. It's all about like, what is that? And that sense of curiosity is really what I feel like signage you do want. And don't laminate. I'm glad that you don't do that. Shininess is like, but if you do need to do a consistent one, I would say cardstock, and just make sure your fonts are the same, because nothing makes me more crazy when you look at every single sign has a different font. It's very, it's almost so busy that it takes away from the product.
These are such great tips. Question from Ashley: is there a go-to ratio of items for storytelling?
Um, let me ask like more of a question. Like, what do you mean? Like for a single display or for your keeping in your store? Is it,
Let's see.
if Ashley will respond?
Single display.
There are some, I mean, you can get too propped out sometimes, but I think that, your risers, how when I started to display is it starts with the architecture. So I'll start with an empty table and the architecture, whether it's a bookcase or a crate or whatnot, that is a prop. So that's the first layer of props. Then it becomes the biggest items on the display that are for sale. And then I add in those. And then I'll add in the other elements that are part of the display, whether it be like matches for candles or a jar of something. And then I'll stand back and look at it and like, what is it missing? What does it need? What is the story that we're telling? And if it's, say camp, I'm going to add firewood as contextualizers, and I'll stack those up as risers, and it plays back to the wood of the crates or the wood on the bookcase. If it's something green, or if I feel like it needs height, I'll go back to what are the florals that I have? What are the colors that we're dealing with? What's going to make the display pop? But I think sometimes I've gone into some stores where it's literally so propped out that you don't know what's being sold. And then when you do pick up something like one of the props, like thinking it's for sale, and it's like, no, that's a prop only. You've kind of now done the opposite. Now you've taken away from the display and you've made it all about the props. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you. And then another question any tips for window displays that have 200-year-old windows that get full sun without putting clothing in the windows?
God, that came up at the H&H America show that I was just at. Sun damage is the biggest challenge that I think retailers have. And it doesn't just bleach out apparel, it bleaches out wood, it bleaches out books. The only thing I can say that we've done with windows that I've had this issue with is they have to change weekly, and it's literally like a schedule. And if you have your base architecture in there, whether like one store that I know, there's always this bookcase in there, and the smalls are what changes. That way, then you don't have to worry about that being ruined, but you literally like, it has to be almost a weekly switch out. And there's a way of doing it. If you decide this is the theme this month, and every say Monday, you change the product out and it goes back to your theme. So if you have other display elements in there telling the story, you don't have to change everything. It's just really your smalls or your products. But that is the age old problem with retail. But if you keep it on a schedule, you have it's when you forget, and then you start pulling everything out and the books are faded and everything's faded.
All right, well, that wraps up the questions. Michelle, thank you so much for being here today and sharing all your tips. Here, I know, is your contact information that everyone can reach you at.
Thank you for following along. If you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to me. Either I answer almost every single DM, and I'm doing something for everybody that's out there that doesn't know. I'm doing something on Instagram called Show Me Your Stores. And I've had to move it over to TikTok. TikTok gives you 10 minutes now versus 90 seconds that Reels gives you. But I'm asking people, send in a photo of your store or a tabletop or a window or your floor setting, and give me what your challenge is. I'm having trouble building up architecture, or we're having trouble filling this bookcase because the shelves are so deep and everything on it's so small. try and keep it to one question. I have had people send it in like everything in the store they want an answer on. But if you have some problem or some challenge, send me your picture, send me an explanation of what the challenge is, and then we'll do a show me your stories on it. And it's again, I'll do it on TikTok, so you have 10 minutes to watch it. I'll tease it on Instagram, and then what I've started to do is say, if you want 10 minutes with me on a Zoom call, I'll talk you through it. So it's like having a free merchandiser. I don't bash stores. Don't worry. Like, please don't, because I have people saying, please don't, like, don't look at the background. It's like, it's not about that. It's really about giving you free advice and helping you with your displays. But thank you, everyone, for joining. I hope I didn't babble on too much.
This was wonderful. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you.